Imagine Europe in flames. The continent, once a tapestry of diverse cultures and thriving cities, is now a vast battlefield. Smoke rises from the ruins of towns, and the cries of the wounded echo through the valleys. This is not a scene from a single battle, but a prolonged agony that lasted for 3 decades. Not a quick fire, but one that burns for 30 years. The 30 Years' War was a relentless conflict that consumed Europe from 1618 to 1648. It was a time when the very fabric of society was torn apart, and the flames of war seemed unquenchable. This wasn't a war of simple battles. It was a complex and multifaceted struggle involving numerous factions and shifting alliances. Soldiers fought not just for victory, but for survival in a landscape ravaged by continuous conflict. It was a grinding, brutal struggle that reshaped the continent. Entire towns were reduced to ashes, and the countryside was left barren. The war's impact was felt far beyond the battlefield, affecting the lives of millions of civilians. From 1618 to 1648, the 30 Years' War raged. It began as a religious conflict between Protestant and Catholic states, but it quickly evolved into a broader struggle for political power and territorial control. It began with religious conflict, but soon became a fight for power and land. Millions died. Entire regions were devastated. The war brought famine, disease, and economic hardship, leaving a lasting scar on the continent. The war's end brought a new Europe, one where nations and religions had to find a way to coexist. The Peace of Westphalia, signed in 1648, marked the end of the conflict and laid the groundwork for a new political order in Europe. The 30 Years' War was a turning point. It signaled the end of an era dominated by religious wars and the beginning of a new age of state sovereignty and diplomacy. It marked the end of an era dominated by religious wars. The treaties that concluded the war established principles of religious tolerance and non-interference in the internal affairs of states, setting the stage for modern international relations. It saw the rise of powerful new states. The war's aftermath saw the emergence of France and Sweden as major European powers, while the Holy Roman Empire's influence waned, and it forced people to rethink the relationship between religion and politics. The war demonstrated the dangers of religious intolerance and the need for a separation between church and state. This wasn't just a war, it was a crucible that forged modern Europe. The 30 Years' War left an indelible mark on the continent, shaping its future and laying the foundations for the Europe we know today. To understand the war, we must go back to the Reformation. In the 16th century, Martin Luther challenged the Catholic Church. His ideas spread like wildfire across Europe, leading to new Protestant churches. The Holy Roman Empire, a patchwork of states, was deeply divided. Some princes embraced Protestantism, others remained staunchly Catholic. This wasn't just about religion, it was about power. The Catholic Habsburg emperors wanted to maintain control. Protestant princes sought greater autonomy. Each side feared the other, creating a tinderbox of resentment and suspicion. Any spark could ignite it. The 30 Years' War was a complex web of alliances and betrayals, a conflict that reshaped the political and religious landscape of Europe. It began in 1618 and lasted until 1648, involving many of the great powers of the time. The war was not just a series of battles, but a prolonged period of turmoil that affected millions of lives. On one side stood the Habsburg emperors, Ferdinand II and later Ferdinand III. These rulers were determined to maintain their dominance over the Holy Roman Empire and to enforce Catholic orthodoxy across their territories. They were the champions of Catholicism, determined to impose their will on the empire. Their vision was one of a unified Catholic Europe, free from the influence of Protestantism, which they saw as a threat to their authority and the social order. Arrayed against them were a coalition of Protestant princes within the empire. These princes, who had embraced the Reformation, were equally determined to protect their religious freedoms and political autonomy. These princes, fearing for their faith and independence, formed alliances with foreign powers. They sought support from other Protestant nations and even Catholic France, which saw an opportunity to weaken the Habsburgs. Denmark, under King Christian IV, intervened early on, hoping to secure Protestant interests and expand Danish influence. Christian IV saw the war as a chance to assert his power and protect his fellow Protestants from Catholic aggression. Sweden, a rising Protestant power led by the brilliant King Gustavus Adolphus, entered the fray with a vengeance. Gustavus Adolphus was a military genius whose innovative tactics and disciplined army turned the tide in favor of the Protestants. France, though Catholic, saw an opportunity to weaken its Habsburg rivals and threw its weight behind the Protestant cause. Cardinal Richelieu, the chief minister, prioritized the balance of power over religious unity, leading France into the conflict. The war became a continental struggle, with armies marching across Europe, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. Cities were besieged, towns were razed, and the civilian population suffered immensely. The 30 Years' War was one of the most devastating conflicts in European history, reshaping the continent's political and religious map forever. The fuse was lit in Prague, Bohemia. In 1618, Protestant nobles, angered by Habsburg restrictions on their religious freedom, threw two Catholic officials out of a window. This defenestration of Prague ignited the Bohemian revolt. The rebels deposed the Catholic king and offered the crown to Frederick V, a Protestant prince. The Habsburgs, outraged, struck back. Emperor Ferdinand II, backed by Catholic forces, crushed the Bohemian rebellion at the Battle of White Mountain in 1620. Frederick fled, earning the mocking nickname the Winter King for his short reign. The Bohemian phase ended in a Catholic victory, but it was just the beginning. Section 5. Northern Storm's Danish and Swedish interventions. The conflict escalated as foreign powers intervened. In 1625, King Christian IV of Denmark, alarmed by Habsburg victories, entered the war. Christian aimed to defend Protestantism and expand Danish territory. However, he faced a formidable foe in Albrecht von Wallenstein, a brilliant and ruthless general in the Habsburg service. Wallenstein's armies defeated the Danes, culminating in the Battle of Lutter in 1626. Christian was forced to sue for peace, his dreams of Protestant dominance in ruins. But the war was far from over. In 1630, a new Protestant champion emerged, Gustavus Adolphus of Sweden. Section 6. The Sun King's Shadow. France enters the fray. Gustavus Adolphus, a brilliant military strategist and devout Lutheran, landed in Germany with a well-trained army. He revolutionized warfare, emphasizing mobility, firepower, and aggressive tactics. His victories at Breitenfeld in 1631 and Lutzen in 1632 shattered the aura of Habsburg invincibility. Although Gustavus Adolphus fell at Lutzen, his victory secured Protestant survival and cemented Sweden as a major power. France, under the shrewd guidance of Cardinal Richelieu, saw an opportunity. Richelieu, though a cardinal, prioritized French interests over religious solidarity. He understood that a Habsburg victory would threaten France's position in Europe. In 1635, France formally entered the war on the Protestant side, providing financial and military support. Section 7. A continent exhausted, the road to peace. The final phase of the war was a grueling stalemate. Armies clashed in battles across Germany, but neither side could achieve a decisive victory. The war had taken its toll. The constant fighting, coupled with disease and famine, ravaged the German states. Millions perished. The once prosperous region lay in ruins. By the 1640s, all sides were exhausted. The war had lost its initial religious fervor, becoming a struggle for power and territory. Negotiations began in the shattered city of Munster and the neighboring city of Osnabrück. Diplomats representing the warring parties gathered, seeking an end to the bloodshed. Section 8. The Peace of Westphalia, a New Order. In 1648, after years of negotiation, the Peace of Westphalia was signed. This series of treaties marked a turning point in European history. The treaties recognized the existing religious divisions, granting Calvinism legal status alongside Catholicism and Lutheranism. Each German state gained the right to determine its own religion, enshrining the principle of state sovereignty. The Habsburgs, weakened by decades of war, had to make concessions. The Holy Roman Empire, already fragmented, was further decentralized. France emerged as the dominant power in Europe, its ambitions checked only by the rise of Sweden and the United Provinces, or the Netherlands. Section 9. Legacy of War, a Changed Europe. The 30 Years' War left an indelible mark on Europe, reshaping its political, social, and economic landscape in ways that would be felt for centuries. The war, which raged from 1618 to 1648, was one of the longest and most destructive conflicts in European history. The war's end marked the decline of religious conflict as the primary driver of European politics. Instead, the focus began to shift towards secular concerns, such as the balance of power and national interest, which would dominate European diplomacy in the years to come. The focus shifted to balance of power and national interest. This shift was a significant turning point, as it laid the foundation for the modern state system, where the sovereignty of states and their territorial integrity became paramount. The Peace of Westphalia, signed in 1648, laid the groundwork for the modern nation-state system. It established the principles of national sovereignty and non-interference in the internal affairs of other states, which are still the cornerstones of international law today. The war also had a profound social and economic impact. Entire regions were depopulated, and the economies of many areas were devastated. The social fabric of Europe was torn apart, and it took decades for the continent to recover. Germany, the main battleground, was devastated. The population was reduced by as much as a third in some areas, and the economic infrastructure was in ruins. The scars of the war were visible for generations. It took decades for the region to recover from the war's destruction. The rebuilding process was slow and arduous, but it eventually led to a period of renewal and growth. The conflict spurred military innovation, leading to changes in tactics, fortifications, and the organization of armies. These innovations would influence European warfare for centuries to come. But it also left a legacy of brutality and suffering. The war's brutality was unprecedented, with widespread atrocities committed by all sides. Civilians bore the brunt of the conflict, suffering from famine, disease, and violence. The 30 Years' War stands as a stark reminder of the human cost of conflict. The war's legacy is a testament to the devastating impact of prolonged warfare on societies and the importance of striving for peace, and the importance of diplomacy and understanding in a world often driven by division. The lessons learned from the 30 Years' War continue to resonate today, reminding us of the value of dialogue and cooperation in resolving conflict.